Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Liege in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 66, An Unusual Day. As he lay in his bed that night, trying to put himself into sleep, Byleth's words earlier hit him harder than anything. Because of me, he thought as his head cleared. Everyone is in danger because of me and my status of being Arvel's vessel, he thought. I want to stay here, but in order to protect everyone, I have to leave this town, he thought as he turned on his side, just thinking about the fact that someday we will have to leave, he thought. I never thought that I'll get attached to a place this much, he thought as he closed his eyes. I guess I'll just enjoy the remaining time I have in Gareg Mach before we inevitably leave this place, he thought as he slowly falls into a pitful sleep. Someday, she thought as she turned on her side. I know that I can't keep him in Gareg Mach forever and he would inevitably leave me someday, she thought. I know that, yet I still held on to the hope that he will choose to stay by my side until the end of our days, she thought as she remembered how Shay would look at the horizons with a wistful look in his eyes, and those wistful look made her afraid and paranoid that one day she will wake up without him greeting her first thing in the morning, and she will only know that he have stole away in the dead of the night and left without much of a goodbye to her. Not that saying his goodbyes to her will be any better, since she knows that she is unwilling to let go of him now more than ever, but now, even if I shouldn't be too happy about the fact that we are essentially trying to prevent another war from blowing out, albeit a secret one, but I can't help but be happy at the thought of being with him always, she thought as she started to fall into a peaceful slumber. Even if he leaves someday, we'll still be together, she thought, and nothing makes her happier at the knowledge that Shay and her will be together always, making her forget all the thoughts and fear she is feeling upon learning that he is the survivor of that mission 7 years ago. All right, she muttered as she looked at the list Lord Seath have given her as her chore for the day. This seems easy enough, she muttered as she navigated through the crowded market, and she nods to herself as she focused on her chore for today, and she is just about to go her merry way when a man clad in a red cloak of a desert nomad, and a staff sling on his back, standing in the middle of the crowded street, face covered by the hood, caught her eyes as the world seems to slow around her. The man lifted his head, revealing his bright green eyes to her. She backed away ever so slightly as the man started to walk towards her. I can sense a familiar presence on you, young lady, the man said. Soft baritone voice seems to rumbled around her. Too familiar, if I may say so myself, he said as he stopped in front of her. She took a step back from the man in fear. Ah, the man said as his bright green eyes met with her brown ones. No need to fear, young one, the man said as his eyes glowed golden and become that of a serpent's. I'm not here to harm you, the man said, merely asking, the man said. Weirdly enough, she seems to calm down as soon as those green eyes of his turn golden, and she feels compelled to cooperate with this strange man no matter what. What is it you want? She asked as carefully as possible as not to anger the man. She can feel a strange aura around the man, strange and foreign, as though he doesn't belong in this world. Just a few answer to all that I ask, the man said in that calm and deep voice of his. Are you born here? The man asked. Why yes, she said. Before I become an orphan, I live here with my family, she said. Wait, what is happening? She thought. Tell me, young lady, the man said. Do you still know the layout of this place by heart? He asked. Yes, she replied, though I don't know to which extent, since this place changed a lot, she said. Why do I keep telling him things? She thought. No worries, the man said. I just need the basic layout of the area in order to perform a purifying ritual, he said. I think that you will do just fine in aiding me in my task, he said. What? She asked. Ah, the man said as though he just realized something. I guess I better explain first, the man said as he adjusted the wooden staff on his back. Explain, she muttered as she keeps staring at the man's glowing golden eyes. What? She asked. The man nods to himself before he took out a small two-way mirror. Here, the man said as he handed the mirror to her. Look through it and you will understand, he said. Understand, she muttered as her hand shook upon touching the fragile but terrifying object in her hand. What? She asked. The truth of this world, the man said nonchalantly and coldly. The truth of this world. She muttered in confusion. Just what is this truth this man is referring to? Everything seems normal around her, the busy bustling of the street, the never-ending waves of people going about their ways, and the normal flow of day-to-day life. So, what is wrong? Peek through the mirror for you to understand the answers to your ask, the man said. She looked at the mirror on her hands and swallowed the lump in her throat before she aligned the mirror to her eye and peeked. Everything seems normal until she saw a man pass them by. The man would have been normal, he would have been normal if it weren't for the disfigured state of his face. She can't distinguish whether he is still human or not before he vanished into thin air. She gasped in shock at what she witnessed. Just what is that? She asked blankly as she stared at the spot where the man disappeared. A residual of those who died, the man said, a lingering presence in which the impurity or rather the distortion that was caused by those who have perished a while back, he said. Distortion? She asked. Allow me to explain, the man said. Then, tell me, she said. She said as she waited for the man to introduce himself. The man said as he realized his rather crude attitude towards the young lady. The name is Kutbay. Kutbay said, my apologies for the late introduction, he said. Now, then, Kutbay said, are you ready to listen to what I have to say, young lady? He asked. She can only nod as she realized that there is no way out of this. Whatever she saw just managed to lock her in a place where she can't turn her back now. So, there is a Nabatean that entered the town on the same day you got home? He asked. That's right, Byleth said as she continued to read and sign the missives on her desk. And you never thought of telling me? He asked. I didn't tell you because I don't think they are here for a fight, Byleth said. More likely, they are merely passing through here, she said. No need to concern us with whoever it is, Byleth said. But, he said as he can still feel the presence of the Nabatean in the town. More likely, that Nabatean is a surveyor, Suthes said. Surveyor? Byleth asked in confusion. He said. What exactly is that, Suthes? He asked just as confused as Byleth. Allow me, Arvel said. Explain away, Arvel, Byleth said. A surveyor is responsible of analyzing the lands through a special tool they have, Arvel said. For what purposes? He asked. To be able to detect the distortion in the lands, Arvel said. Distortion? Byleth asked. You see, girlie, Arvel said, the fighting and the conflict between Nabatea and Agartha above other things have created some kind of alterations in this lands. Those alterations are the cause of the magic particles and life forces left by both Nabateans and Agarthans alike. Though those alterations are completely invisible to the eyes, it will still affect the cognitive and perception of the ordinary people, and to prevent that from happening, Nabatea trained specialists to detect and cleanse those distortions, Arvel said. So, that's a surveyor? Byleth asked. That's right, Arvel said. Though, they are trained to cleanse the distortion, but cleanse is a rather far-fetched term for what they actually do, Suthes said. What do you mean? He asked. It did say cleanse, but the best they can do is just patch what is broken, Suthes said. In other words, he said, it is just a temporary and quite a fragile solution to deal with the problem, Arvel said. And that's where the special spell used by the surveyors comes in, Suthes said. A special spell? Byleth asked. That's right, Suthes said. A spell with a special coating, one that isn't easily broken by any magic or caster, and each surveyor have their special seal and coating on their spells, she said. In other words, no one but them can break or cast that spell. He asked. You hit the nail on the head, twerp, Suthes said. I wish you were this sharp when it comes to other things too, she said. I think that is an insult, but I'll take it as a compliment instead, Suthies, he said with a sheepish grin. You are very welcome, twerp. Suthies said as the pendant around Byleth's neck started to shake in delight. He just chuckled at the goddess as the pendant looked pleased with itself. He never thought that he'll ever see an inanimate object look that happy. Then again, said inanimate object housed the goddess of Fodlan anyway. Well, the goddess is happy, the paperwork is done, and Arvel is still the voice of reason between us three, Byleth said as she put her quilt back to the ink bottle. How about we go for tea? She asked. Seconded, he said. Why is he the voice of reason? Suthies exclaimed, looking quite offended. Again, he don't know how a pendant can look so offended. Because of reasons, Byleth said as she stood up. That isn't a reason. Suthies exclaimed as smoke emits from the pendant. It is, Suthies, Byleth said as they exited the room. It is, she said as the pendant continued to emit puffs and huffs in a form of the clouds of smokes appearing on top of the pendant. I managed to get my hands on the pastries I was telling you about yesterday, he said as Byleth took his arm. Really? Byleth asked. Yup, he said, though, I did pull a few strings here and there, but I did it somehow, he said. And by strings, he meant that the baker have caught on to who the special lady that he is thinking of giving such a pastry and promptly whipped out a batch, Arvel said. Oh, Suthies said, I guess the baker have heard the rumors and decided to help out this hopeless and very slow night, huh? Suthies said. What's that supposed to mean? He asked. That you are right, Arvel said. Guess everyone is on board for the two of you. Suthies said. Suthies, Byleth hissed. Everyone can see it, girly, Arvel said, and everyone is already taking bets. He said. Come again, Byleth said. Exactly, Arvel said. Everyone wanted the twerp to come again after he plow you like a cornfield and plant his seed in your dash, Suthies said. Suthies, Byleth exclaimed as her face turned as red as the Adrestian coat of arms. I'll pretend that I didn't hear any of that, he said as he felt his cheeks heating up. Yes, pretend you didn't hear that, Byleth said as she looked away. Come on, you two. Arvel and Suthies exclaimed. Stop being stubborn and get together already. Suthies said. At this point, you two should just get married since half of the population already thought that you two are a couple and is just waiting for the day you two come clean with them. Arvel said. Half? Byleth asked. Half, Arvel said solemnly. Oh, Suthies, Byleth muttered. Oh, they are probably mistaken, he said with a shrug of his shoulders. I mean, we are not that sweet dash, he said. Right, Suthies said. Around one another, he said, and there is no way that you would like me that way, right, your grace? He asked. I mean, we are friends. No, more than friends. We are best friends, he announced proudly. For some reason, Byleth's smile faltered at that. All right, Byleth said. Best friends, she muttered. Did I say something wrong? He thought as he saw Byleth's crestfallen face. Moron, Byleth thought as she looked at the confused and oblivious look on Shay's face. And Arvel and Suthies is cursing Shay to hell and back. As she sat on the grassy floor of the hill overlooking the towns below Gareg Mach, the monastery casting an ominous shadow upon them, she looked at the mirror on her hand blankly, and beside her, Kutbay stood tall and proud as his bright green eyes looked at the horizon. But how about Sir Shay? She asked in worry. Sir Shay? Kutbay asked. Is he safe? She asked. I don't have the knowledge to that, young lady, Kutbay said. But, she said as fear started to consume her, if he is, then, what would I do? She asked. Kutbei looked at her for a while. Then, how about this, he said as she lifted her eyes to meet his. I'll lend you that mirror and make sure that this Sershay is alright, and in return, I ask for your cooperation, Kutbei said. Yes, she said. Of course, she said, trying to calm the rapid beating of her heart. It is only a fair trade, she said. Good, Kutbei said. She have to make sure that Shay is safe. Chapter 67, The Dusk Before the Conflict. So, she said as she walked with him towards the reception hall, you are chosen to take part in the White Heron Cup as a judge. She asked. More like, Shay said, coerced into it by Manuela and Hanneman, he said. That sounds about right, she said with a nod. And why is that? Shay asked as he raised an eyebrow towards her. You lack elegance, Suthies said. You are tone deaf, Arvel said. And you lack grace, she said. Hey, Shay said. And we love you for that, she said as she patted his back, careful not to put too much strength into it or she will risk pushing him to or through the wall, again. Is that supposed to make me feel better? Shay asked. Is it working? She asked. No, Shay said. She reached up and rubbed his head. How about now? She asked. Is it working? She asked with a toothy grin on her face. Stop that, Shay said with a pout on his face. Nope, she said as she rubbed his head rougher, further musing his hair. Your Grace, Shay said in a mock warning, this is your final warning, he said. And she asked as she continued to rub his head, messing his hair even more. What you gonna do, huh? She asked, challenging him as she keeps messing with his hair. That's it, Shay said before he leaned down and lifted her in his arms. She squealed in surprise before it dissolved into a chorus of delightful laughters as Shay swayed around in a waltz with her in his arms. How's that for being graceful? Shay asked as he bumped his forehead on hers just as she wrapped her arms around his neck. She hummed playfully and happily. I'll give it a 4 out of 10, she said with a smile as her fingers started to tangle themselves in his hair and her other hand settled on his cheek. By the goddess, Shay said with a soft chuckle as she caressed his cheek with her thumb. You are hard to please, milady, he said. She just laughed softly at the sound of his soft laughs before she opened her eyes and met with his. As the world is beginning to disappear around her and as she is starting to drown in his eyes once more, she heard someone clearing their throats behind them, effectively breaking the spell Shay have cast upon her. As much as I hate interrupting, Shamir said, everyone is waiting for you, Shay, she said. All right, she muttered as she hesitantly unwound her arms around him before he put her down. I'll be right there, Shay said as a light blush colored his cheeks. Why, your Grace, he said. I'll see you later, she said. Do your best and no biases, she said with a mock strict tone. I'll try my best, Shay said before he turned and run towards the door of the reception hall. So, Shamir said, when is the wedding? She asked with a small grin. There will be no wedding, she said. Oh, Shamir said. She started as she swallowed a lump in her throat. He doesn't like me that way, she said as she felt her heart falls to the sole of her feet. I'm sure that is no dash, Shamir said. He basically announced to the goddess that we are best friends, she said, interrupting Shamir. Shamir just sighed. Just how stupid can you two get? She muttered. At this rate, we will all have gray hair before you two become a couple, she said. What was that? She asked. You know what you heard, Shamir said. Just be honest with him, she said. Easier said than done, Shamir, she said. Okay, Shamir said as she followed her to the dining hall. Where is this hesitation coming from? She asked. You are not famous for being hesitant but for being confident and sure of yourself, Shamir said. So, Why are you hesitating now? She asked. Simple, she said as her eyes landed on Shay. I don't want to ruin what we have, she said wistfully and forlornly. Shamir looked at the archbishop and saw the longing and affectionate look in her eyes as she watched the purple-haired knight. A soft and loving smile appeared on her face as she continued to watch Shay. They only need to be honest with one another, Shamir thought as she remembered the same look Shay shot at Byleth whenever she isn't looking. I swear, she thought in exasperation as she thought about how two people can be so obvious while not being able to put two and two together, the wonders of the human mind, she thought with a groan. In one corner of the reception hall, Sophia stood there, watching Shay as the White Heron Cup is still ongoing. The joyful chatters and the gleeful cheers of students and staffs alike echoed throughout the hall, spreading the joy as the occasion continues. However, her heart is anything but joyful at the moment as she gripped the mirror on her hand, trying to stop it from shaking too much. It will be all right, he is all right, she thought as she looked at the man she loved, and fear started to shroud her heart once more as varying range of emotion washed over her, and fear is the most prevalent among the waves of emotions that is invading her heart at the moment. And the winner for the White Heron Cup, Professor Manuela said, and tension and anticipation hang in the air as every people in the room waited for the announcement. The Blue Lion House, she announced. The audience erupted into cheers after that, but the cheers is drowned out by the sound of her heart beating rapidly in her chest. Right, she thought, I will confirm that he is fine, and then, she thought as she gripped the mirror in her hand even tighter as though she trying to take her courage from the object. I will steal my heart and I'll tell him, she thought, that I love him and I want to be with him for the rest of my life, she thought as her eyes glued themselves to the man clad in the white armor that told every person he will come across that he is a member of the strongest and most elite order of the knights in Fodlan, knights that is handpicked by the Archbishop herself, the Knight of Ceros. I don't know what Manuela and Hanneman have been eating, but asking a man that knows not a drop about the art of dancing is kinda offish, Shay said as he leaned back, using his hands as a way to support him. Well, you are a simple-minded man, she said as she waited for a fish to bite on her bait. Sorry for being simple-minded, Shay asked as he crossed his arms in indignation. I'm complimenting you, silly, she said with a giggle. Oh, Shay said skeptically. That simple-mindedness of yours makes it easier for you to be honest, makes it easier to approach you and talk to you, and it was that simple-mindedness that made you so candid, she said affectionately. I love that about you, she said lovingly as she gave him a smile that she is sure came out more loving than she intended to. Shay muttered GG's, he said as he started to scratch the back of his head. That's, Shay said with a soft giggle. I'm flattered, Your Grace, he said. I wasn't flattering you, she said. I'm merely stating facts, she said softly as she kept her eyes on the water, refusing to look at him lest he saw her face and gave away the loving sentiments she holds for him. Shay gave her a soft and happy laugh, making her sneak a peek at him, and at once she can feel her heart racing upon seeing the smile on his face, the type of smile that reaches his eyes, the smile she loves so much. Thank you, Byleth, Shay said softly as his eyes softened into one of happiness and adoration. She didn't even felt her rod moving as a fish bites on her bait, nor did she care as reached out to touch him on the cheek. I wonder how would those eyes would look like if you ever tell him how you massacred Berling and her band of mercenaries? Will it look at you with hate as he proclaims how he will skewer your chest with his blade instead of the soft words that proclaims his desires to protect you as long as he lives? She froze halfway as she heard those words, suddenly feeling like her hands doesn't deserve to touch the man she loves. Her hands are tainted with the blood of his friends or those whom he considered his family after all. Your Grace, Shay called out in confusion. Nothing, she said as she looked towards the water again, heart heavy with guilt and fear. Why on earth would he stay with you when you are the one who killed his whole mercenary company? When you are the one he wishes to slay all these years? If you are not feeling well, then I can escort you back to your room, Shay said. She leaned on him as a response. I'm fine, she said as she felt her heart get heavier by the weight of her guilt as she seek comfort from the very man she have wronged. Just thinking, she said as the voice mocks her even more, telling her that she is cruel as her moniker have branded her to be, to even think about seeking comfort from the man whom she have taken everything from. Want to tell me? Shay asked as she shifted her position so that she is laying her head on his chest instead. She didn't say anything as she think for a moment. Should she tell him or should she hide her transgressions from him for the rest of her life? She said as she looked him in the eyes, trying to see if the answer to her own dilemma is within the depths of those earnest and gentle gaze of his purple hues, but to her horror, the selfish side of her have overtaken the side that carried her guilt. It told her that if she hid the truth, then she will have him for as long as she wanted him to. He will never resent her, nor will he ever leave her. She will have him to herself for all her days. Those words, those vile and cruel words, lead her to this greedy temptations of the promises to have Shay, to be able to keep him here, as she keeps sinking her vile and sinful claws into him until he realized it is too late to leave, since she already caught him in a glided cage where she will keep him trapped forever, in her unyielding and suffocating embrace, refusing to let him out forevermore. Yes, keep him, take him into your embrace, drown him in your love and affection, so that he will never be left wanting and desiring for release. Guide him further into the dark where you keep your wicked transgressions from him, hide your true nature from him and show him only the beauty in which you hid the demon lurking below. Keep your secrets and you will never see his eyes darken in hatred of you. And nothing is more tempting than the words of the demon in her heart, as it gave her promises of the love she so desires from him, to be able to keep drowning in the gentle and soft gazes of those purple hues of his. Nothing, she said. I'm just happy that you are not as busy as you usual is and is able to spend the day away with me, she said. I'm not too busy when it comes to you, Shay said softly, sending her heart aflutter upon hearing him say that. You know that, right? He asked, trying his best to tell her that he is sorry that his works is preventing him from showing her the words he meant. I would always try to finish my work as fast and efficiently as I can for the sole reason of spending as much time with you, Shay said as he leaned his forehead on the crown of her head. But Seath and Alois just tend to pile works and training to me that I can only give you my nights lately, Shay said. My apologies, Your Grace, he said softly. It's okay, she said. I learned to be patient when it comes to waiting for you, she said. How so? Shay asked as her hand made a beeline towards his hand. I learned that if I'm patient enough, then fortune will smile on me and I will have my turn on you, she said. Is that so? Shay asked as he adjusted his weight to his other hand while the other took hold of her hand. Not like I have a choice, she said as Shay nuzzled his nose into her palm before he planted a kiss on it. Patience and waiting is all I have when it comes to you, she said. Otherwise, I'm in the mercy of loneliness, she stated. Don't worry, Shay said. I'll try to talk to Seath about my workload, he said. I'll appreciate that, she said. Shay hummed in response before they are covered in a comfortable silence as dusk started to set in, dyeing the sky in crimson and purple of the dying sun and the cold air that permeates through Fodlan. Sophia raised the mirror towards the purple-haired knight and tried to look through it, but to her horror, she can't find it in her to actually look through it and find out that the man she loves is no longer of this world, or worse, someone is wearing his skin. And with a heavy heart, she brought down the mirror and left. Chapter 68, The Nearing Conflict. She tossed and turned in her bed as sleep seems elude her this evening. In days' time is the anniversary of the completion of Garag Mach Monastery and she is running out of time. She is still having a hard time deciding if she should tell him or not, but by hiding the truth from him would be akin to her stabbing him on the back and she would be nothing but a coward. However, considering that she is more afraid of him leaving her behind or him hating her outweighs the guilt which have been growing and growing as the days goes by. She don't know what to do. She don't want to lose him, but she can't bear lying to him like this. Shay is a good man, the best in fact, with all of his flaws and imperfections which made him divine and sublime in her eyes, and he deserve only the best, if not the world, and she is determined to bring every ounce of joy to him forevermore, and lying to him would defeat that purpose. She closed her eyes and she hopes that tomorrow will bring her clarity in regards of her decisions. She can only hope. I assume that all the preparation is at the ready, Professor Aprodathides asked as she entered the laboratory. Yes, Silas furred in delight, quite magnificently so, my blind-eyed beauty, he said. Just a little tweak here and there, Silas said. I trust you not to go overboard, Professor, Aprodothedes said. Silas merely laughed at that. No promises, he said. After all, Silas said this is for the namesake of discovery, exploration, progress. Silas raved like the madman he is. Well, Heracles can't complain. I didn't try to stop you from being so over the top, Aprodothedes said. Ah, the big brute, Silas said. Didn't know he scare you, Aprodothedes, he said as his green eyes sparkle in amusement as he gave her a sideway glance before he came back to the task at hand. Aprodothedes said as she shrugged her shoulders nonchalantly. Not as much as his 3 hours lecture of doom scares me, and let me tell you, Professor, she said, Heracles' lectures is scarier than his prowess in the battlefield, Aprodothedes said with a giggle. Silas just chuckled at that. Oh, yes, Celsus said as he tried to contain his giggles. The fearful lectures from the metamorphic slaughterer himself, Celsus said before the contraption on his left blinked and let out a soft noise. Oh, Celsus said, it seems like they are back, he muttered. Splendid, Celsus said with delight. I hope you brought a delightful news for me, Odes, he said with a wide grin on his face. It is done, Lord Silas, Odys said. Remarkable. Excellent, Celsus said in delight. Ah, he moaned as he wrapped his arms around himself as a smile of extreme ecstasy is plastered upon his face. Just thinking about the fruits of our labors, every possible outcomes is sending a waves of pleasure in me, Silas said in excitement. Should we fail or should we succeed? Oh, the wonders and the curiosities, he raved. Such excitement, I can barely contain it, Silas said. Well, now that is what I want to hear, Aprodothedes said with a grin on her face. I trust that the operation is underway, Professor, Aprodothedes asked. Oh, it is, Silas said, and it is time we, he said with a grin, do our end of the bargain, he said as he looked at the glass again and grinned at the several wires connected to a large man inside the container. Ah, but, Silas said, I find their cause a bit, he said, too callous and unrefined in terms of science, but I can't complain much since it yields results, Silas said. And you are all about results, Aprodothedes said. And that's where we are too similar on, Aprodothedes, Silas said. I will complain on the method, but I won't complain if it yield results, he said. Likewise, Aprodothedes said, but I'm more on the more interesting type of results, she said, ones that will entertain me enough to alleviate this boredom of mine that have accumulated for 3 millennia, Aprodothedes said. So, this unusual development is not in my plan, nor did it come into fruition alongside my strategies. Nevertheless, it is quite entertaining, Aprodothedes said before she shook with laughter. Well, I'll leave it up to you, Professor, she said. Do try to be careful as you proceed and not to be too flashy, Aprodothedes said as she leaves the room. Nonsense, Celsus said. Science is meant to be flashy to show off how glorious it have progress and bloomed to the world, he said. Aprodothedes just smiled as she closed the room. Well, nobody would say that I didn't try, she muttered. Now, what to do next? Aprodothedes asked herself. Ah, I know, she said. Ah, the possibilities of the outcomes, Aprodothedes muttered as her smile grows. We'll see, she said as she giggled as she disappeared into the darkness of the hallways of Alquam. Her disembodied mischievous giggles echoed throughout the dark hallways. She stood in front of her parents' grave as she looked at the ring her father gave her. One day I hope you'll give this ring to someone you love as well as I love her. Someone I love just as much as father loves mother, she muttered. No, she already knows, and she knows that no matter what happened she already have her heart in his hands and she won't have it any other way. After all, who wouldn't want to be loved by someone as kind and as loving as Shay, and who wouldn't want to give such a kind and lovable man all their love, all their affection to him? Shay, who have only treated her heart with all the kindness and all of the gentleness he can muster. Shay, who she have entrusted her life with in every single battles they've been in, never let her down once and always comes through for her, she, who saw every vulnerable and tender parts of her yet never taken advantage of her despite everything he can gain, she, who saw her as Byleth, an individual and not a weapon they can utilize for their advantage, they can use for their cause, they can use for their goals, or the strong and regal archbishop that guided the Savior King to victory and ensure his crown and his throne. None of those. To she is merely Byleth, a flawed individual who is still learning about the world and herself, and stood by her and hold her hands through thick and thin, all the while showing her the simple pleasures in life and teaching her how to live for herself and not for the sake of Fodlan or for the sake of protecting Dimitri's rule, and she love him for that. I don't want to lose him, Dad, she muttered to the grave. I want to be with him, I want to build a life with him, to someday give him the family he always wanted, but, she said as she looked at the ring once more, I don't know if this ring will ever be in the possession of its intended owner now, not now when I know I've wronged him, she said. I don't want to lie to him, but I don't want him to hate me, she muttered as she closed her hands around the ring and held it close to her heart as though to pray for the love she desired from the man she wished to spend her life with. What should I do? She asked. I don't know anymore, she muttered. Your Grace, Knight called out to her. She straightened her posture and steeled her face into her usual neutral expression before she faced the knight. Yes? She asked. The king and his entourage, as well as the king of Almira and his entourage, have arrived, the knight said, as well as your former students, she said. She nods as a respond. Thank you, she said. I shall go and greet them at the audience chamber in a few moments, she said. Of course, Your Grace, the knight said as she bowed her head before she left her to her thoughts once more. She looked up at the crimson and purple sky. The purple hue reminds her of the eyes that looked at her with only the utmost respect and adoration, and she can feel her resolve crumble at that. What am I going to do? She muttered to herself as she felt herself being split in half again as she decided on her choice and their consequences. Sir Nicholas stood on the sideline as he watched his lord tap his foot impatiently on the ground, staring at the empty throne before them where the archbishop should be waiting for their arrival, but as it seems the archbishop isn't present to greet them upon arrival, which is quite unconventional and frankly, rude to not greet her king. The king stood tall and imposing as he waited for the archbishop's arrival when the great oak door opened ever so slowly and the archbishop entered, and as though a spell have been cast upon the king, his majesty immediately relaxes, shoulders slump a little bit, showing that the archbishop's presence is enough to calm his majesty. Your Grace, the king greeted, trying not to sound too happy upon seeing Lady Byleth. I hope your trip haven't been too tedious, Mitya, the archbishop said. My apologies for not being able to greet you right away, she said with a somber tone. Were you doing something, Your Grace? The king asked. Just reflecting on something, the archbishop said. No need to worry, Mitya, she said. I'm here to teach. Claude chimed in. Of course, Claude, the archbishop said with a small smile. Welcome back to Fodlan, she said. I hope you find it as welcoming as Almira is, the archbishop said. Sure, it is. Claude said with a shrug of his shoulders. I see that you and his kingliness is doing a fine work rebuilding Fodlan, he said. It wasn't easy, the archbishop said, with all the insurrections happening from former empire's territories and some of the alliance's lower lords and all, she said, but Mitya did a good job keeping the peace of Fodlan, the archbishop said with a gracious smile towards the king. The king doesn't look convinced about the archbishop's praises and was about to say something when the archbishop perked up as someone approached them slowly. The sound of the soft clanging of metal against the stone floor of the monastery seems to take all of the archbishop's attention until the door softly opened, revealing a purple-haired knight. Sir Nicholas didn't miss the way the archbishop's face light up and her smile grows ever brighter upon seeing the purple-haired man. I have come to report to you, Your Grace, the purple-haired knight said as he bowed his head. Right, the archbishop said as she turned towards Seath. Can you show Mitya and the others on the way to their rooms, Seath? She asked. As though this is a routine for her right-hand man, Lord Seath bowed. Of course, Your Grace, he said. She, the Archbishop said as she walks towards the knight. Of course, the purple-haired knight said as the Archbishop leads him out of the audience chamber. Sir Nicholas turned his eyes away from the pair and looked at his king and saw the forlorn and the longing looks the king shot the Archbishop as she walk away holding another man's arm. So, what is your plan? Sylvain asked him. About what? He asked as he looked at his warm cup of tea. The scent chamomile invaded his senses, sending him in a blissful and calm state of mind. You do know that Professor is in love with Circe, right? Sylvain stated. He just stared at the tea at the statement he tried to deny since the day he saw them interact with each other, the way Byleth looked at her so-called bodyguard as though he is her whole world, her whole heart, and what he wouldn't give for her to look at him like that. You don't have to tell me, Sylvain, he said. I already know that she have given her heart to someone else, he said as he felt his heart dropped as he remembered all the ways Byleth's eyes lit up whenever she is with the purple-haired knight. That night at the ball during Garland Moon, the way Byleth seems relaxed, content even as they sway to the slow tempo of waltz while the Archbishop, the most influential woman in all of Fodlan, the goddess vessel and partner, lay her ear on the knight's chest as he saw her lips let out a sigh of contentment as though being inside his arms brought her nothing but a blissful peace, safe from all the harms of the world. So, Sylvain asked, are you just going to stand there and let him take what you wanted the most? He asked. He contemplated Sylvain's words as he stared at his cup once more. Of course not, he said, but what would I do if the one giving herself to that man is the one I wanted the most? He asked. I'm fighting a losing battle, Sylvain, he said as hopelessness and despair slowly enveloped his heart in its vice grip and the voice mocks him even louder. Why would she choose someone who is going to drag her to the bottom and to the suffocating darkness rather than the safety of the light where she can roam free forevermore? And they are right. Why would Byleth choose someone like him when she can choose someone so radiant like that man? Her feelings still remains unanswered, right? Sylvain asked. And it's only a matter of time until that man noticed just how lovely and great Byleth is, he said rather dreamily as he thought of her again. Beautiful, kind, gentle, intelligent, and strong Byleth. What man wouldn't want someone as amazing, someone as perfect as Byleth? Why would she want me when she could have want someone who is not wrought in darkness like me, not shadowed with the voices of the dead, not carrying so many baggage that I might drag her down to the dirt with me? He asked. Then, Sylvain said, why don't start fixing yourself then? He asked. Why not try and let go of the dead? Sylvain asked. But, he said, if you don't want to hurt her because of your traumas then, why not work on it? If you think that she is too good for you then improve yourself rather than wallow in your despair, Sylvain said. And Sylvain is right. If he wanted to be with Byleth then, he have to start getting his stuff together and work on his wellness and stop being dragged down by the past. The dead won't come back no matter what happened and they are better left in the past, he have to look to the future and chase after her. He looked up and saw the purple-haired knight carrying some equipments towards the knight's barracks and thought to himself. He would not lose to him, he will do his best to improve himself, to better himself for her because someone as amazing as Byleth deserve nothing but the best, if not, the best. He would not lose to him. Chapter 69, The Nearing Conflict 2. The wind of celebration have swept across the monastery and the towns below as the celebration of the anniversary of the completion of Garag Mach Monastery have arrived. The monastery have reached its 1002 years of its completions and the joyous musics can heard all the way to the Archbishop's bedchamber. However, the Archbishop's heart is in a state of turmoil as she looked at the ring on her palm, trying to find the answer to the questions that is bombarding her heart since the day he told her about Berling and how the Ashen Demon have slaughtered every single people in his mercenary group saved one. To be frank, Berling's mercenary instigated the fight and she is more than willing to stood there the whole night while the transaction between noble finished, but they have to attack them in the dead of the night. That saying, she only retaliated as per they are paid to, and she guessed it was the same in the opposition. They are paid to make sure the transaction between their rival families did not go through, and she merely did her best to defend herself since it was Shay who attacked her first despite the fact that she told him to run if he wanted to live. Well, menacingly told him to run. That might have provoked him even more, but that's beside the point. she still almost ended the man she ended up falling for that night, and she don't know what she would say, what she would do to alleviate the hatred he felt for the Ashen Demon. One less people to take him away from you. She sighed at that as she is once again at the loss of she should do. No. She don't want this, she don't want to lie to him, he deserves the world, and if she lied to him that would defeat the purpose. He doesn't deserve to be lied to, he deserves the honest truth from her. With that in mind, she nodded to herself as she steeled her resolved. Tonight, she will tell him, and she will try her best to endure the outcome of her decision. The night of the celebration of the anniversary of the completion of the monastery. She looked at the mirror on her hand and tried to find her courage as her mind plagued her of the possibility that the man she loved is not who is but an impostor of him. No. She muttered to herself as she shook her head, no more running away, I have to do this, I have to make sure he is safe and not caught into this nonsense between this Agarthan and Nabatean thing, she muttered, tonight, I'll make sure and then, I'll tell him my feelings, she muttered as she gripped the small mirror in her hands. The mirror is small, the size of Professor Hanneman's monocle, but a little bigger than it and rimmed with gold and silver. She don't know what kind of magic it is that worked with a pure metal as its component, but somehow it did. So fragile, yet it is one of the practical things she ever seen. Then, I'll hold my end of the bargain, she muttered. Sir Kutbay, she muttered. She don't know what this ritual is, but if it meant that it will help the town, then she will help, but she need to put her heart at ease first before she can concentrate, since Kutbay said that her concentration is essential for the purifying ritual, and so, that's what she will do, put her heart at ease and help with Kutbay's effort and forget all about this. Now, it is time. Silas announced as the contraction around him light up, signaling him that everything is set for tonight, and what a time to deploy our plan. A night of a ball. A night for celebration. Silas raved as he looked at the eternal night sky of Alquam. Shall we dance tonight, dear Suthies? He asked to no one present before he laughed madly as everything around him lit up. So, those things, Shay said as he stared at the gigantic and colorful balloons at the air. A gift from Claude to commemorate the 1002 anniversary of the completion of Gareg Mach. She said as she admired the colorful balloons. And the wooden miniature statues of a deer, lion, and eagle? Shay asked. Gifts from Klyman, she said. Oh, Shay said as he looked deep in thought as he looked at the balloons and the wooden miniature statues of lion, eagle, and deer, eyebrow furrowed. Something wrong? She asked. Since they have known each other for a while now and she spent the most time with Shay for the past months, it wasn't hard to pick up some of his body language and mannerisms, not to mention all his likes and dislikes. This furrowed eyebrow is a sign that he is worried and is lost in thoughts, which made her worry in turn. No. Shay said. It's just, he said as he grasped his chest as though something is hurting his heart. For some reason, he said, I feel uneasy looking at those, Shay said. Did you sense a spell? She asked as she tried to focus her senses. I don't sense any, she said as she felt nothing seems to be amiss in this still but cold night. Maybe I'm just imagining it, but still, Shay said. No. He said as he shakes his head. Maybe it is just my imagination, he said with a sheepish smile, seeing no Agarthans in sight. Well, saved for Miss Valerie, that is. Kinda make me feel paranoid for a lot of reasons, and things is too peaceful for the past few months that I can't help but feel uneasy, Shay said, but not that I'm ungrateful, but considering that the news of Arvel and me might be spreading around with Refermer now, he said before she saw a look in his eyes that told her that he is feeling uneasy and he is trying so hard to hide the look of utter sadness. And she understand him. Shay told her in a drunken stupor one night that he have been looking for a place to call home for a long time, and he have finally found it the day he met her, the day he came to Gareg Mach, and that made this whole situation even more jarring than ever, since he would be forced to abandon this place for the sake of its safety. And also, the thought of him being hunted for the rest of his life. Is it any wonder why she is more than willing to give up the life of opulence and comfort for a life of a vagabond? There is no way she is going to let him face this alone. If he still wanted her to accompany him, then she will. No, that's not it. Even if he refuses her, she will still follow. After all, Gareg Mach or Fodlan isn't home for her if he isn't there. Wherever he goes, that's where she go because wherever he goes is home. Your Grace. She asked worriedly. I'm fine, she said as she leaned on him, trying to avoid looking into those tempestuous eyes of his that only promises to lay siege on her resolved and made it crumble into dust once more. I hope you are not catching an illness because I swear if you hit another one I'll dash, Shay said as his worry started to dissolve into indignation. I'm not, she said trying to assure him that she isn't falling ill, and I said that I was sorry about that time, didn't I? She asked as she rubbed his bicep to calm him down. That day, she told Manuela and Seeth not to mum a word about her catching a flu while he is away with Shamir and Didu and Dusker, but somehow he still managed to catch words of her illness, and she didn't know a man can ride from the opposite side of the continent to another in a day, his poor horse. Shay just let out a sigh as he put his forehead on the crown of her head. I can't help but be fearful whenever you get sick, he murmured into her hair. I know and I'm sorry, she said. Shay is always fearful of her getting sick, and she initially chalked it up on the fact that she set his hair on fire time and time again, and she almost always used up her pulse every time, but now she knows that fear is rooted to something else and she don't know how to comfort him every time she fell ill. Sorry, Shay said softly as his arm snaked around hers before she felt him holding her hand. What for? She asked as Shay slowly intertwined their fingers, playing with her fingers in the process. I'm becoming overbearing and I'm starting to overreact, but can you blame me? Shay asked. I just can't help but worry about you, he said as she closed her fingers around his. Well, if you being overbearing and overreacting is you cooking me food all day and nursing me back to health while letting me use you as a body pillow as you read me Sir Gavin's novel again, then you won't hear me complaining, she said with a slight smile. She won't admit it to him since she don't want her poor knight to worry, but getting sick is one of her guilty pleasures. Call her a masochist and all, but no one will be able to deny that being taken care of by the person they love, having them by their side as long as possible, and having all sort of excuse to be able to get close to them is reason enough to enjoy being ill once in a while, right? Just, Shay said with a sigh. Take care of yourself, all right? He said. Of course, she said as she closed her eyes. For you, I will, she added in her mind. It seems like Little Sirius Monastery have reached the anniversary of its completion, Kutbay said as he navigated through the crowded street. The town is buzzing with so much energy that it is easy to be sweep away from all the festivities and just indulge in one night of pleasure, he said as he took his staff from his back, but as a surveyor, I mustn't be too indulgent, otherwise I'll be too distracted to fulfill my given duty passed to me by my predecessors, Kutbay said as he tapped his staff on the cobblestone before a magic circle bearing an unknown crest appeared on the ground. Now, mark this place for the ritual, he muttered as the circle started retract until it was only the size of a button. Now, on to the next one, Kutbay said as he slung his staff on his back once more. He sigh, what a busy day, Kutbay said as he continued walking towards his next destination. So many things and not enough time, he said. I hope the young miss have already put her heart at ease, Kutbay muttered. After all, her heart is the most important tool during the cleansing ritual, he said as he disappeared among the buzzing crowds. Chapter 70, The Night of the Festival. The veil of night have enveloped Fodlan, and as the creatures started to settle into their rest for them to greet the next dawn, however, joyous music, laughter, and chatters can be heard among the towns below the imposing but beautiful stone beast nestled in the breast of Okama Mountain as the denizens of the place celebrated its birth to the world as a symbol of faith and hope. Rich sounds coming from the melody of violins and bass resounded throughout the monastery as the staff, children of nobility and the nobles alike celebrated the festival. There is happy chatters, whispers of promises of a tryst, and sweet words of promises among them. The king can be seen roaming around the monastery, looking for the woman of his heart. High and low he looked, but catching neither a glimpse of her shadow nor the sound of her footsteps. She is not here, Dmitri, Flame said as she appeared with Didu. That's strange, Dmitri said as he was curious about the archbishop's absence. Where did she go? He asked. To town, Flame said simply. Unescorted? Dmitri asked in shocked. As he recalls, some of the knights are not working this day and have come home to their families to celebrate this occasion with them. Of course not, silly, Flame said with a knowing giggle. What could possibly be funny about her roaming the streets alone? Dmitri asked with a cocked of his eyebrow. She is not alone, Flame said. Shay is with her, she said cautiously. It have been that way since he arrived here, since he is her bodyguard and all, Flame said. Plus, this is their routine of sorts, she said. What do you mean? Dmitri asked as he felt himself dreading the information about this so-called routine of theirs. If Shay is not too busy, which he usually isn't when it comes to Professor, they would either waste the day away in her bedchamber or they would wander around town after the morning service every weekend, Flame said with a giggle at the thought of both idiots going on a date without realizing it is a date. Dmitri is quiet at that statement. He heard rumors after rumors about the Archbishop and her bodyguard, and those words of mouths kept him awake at night, looking at the emerald glint in the darkness of his lonely chamber as though to mock him of the future that he will never have, since the ring will never find itself in the possession of its intended owner because its owner is in love with another. As cruel as it sounds, he wishes, prayed to the goddess residing inside that stone pendant hanging around her neck, that her feelings will remain unanswered by the man she wanted the most, but knowing that the goddess have smiled upon the man who kept her safe all this time and accompanied her in every battle she have, he knows that the goddess will once again ignore his wishes, but this time, he understand the goddess. This is the man that her vessel and family have chosen to give her heart to. How can he compete with that? A man that have been by her side since the day he met her, a man that fought battles after battles with her, a man that she can count on to have her back in the midst of battle, the man whom she entrusted her heart to, willingly and gladly. How can one compete with someone like that? She hummed along the sound of the flutes, lutes, hurdy-gurdy, and a variety of recorders as the sound floated all around in a joyous melody. She smiled as she watched Shay play the recorder while he is dancing with several children to the tune he is playing, a music from his time as a mercenary, and the melody brought her back to the time. She closed her eyes while she reminisced about the good old days as a mercenary. She remembered the music, the banters, the chatters, and most importantly Geralt, how she wished that he is still here. She was brought back from her reverie as the music ended and she saw Shay patting the head of one of the children with a happy smile on his face before he walked where she is sitting. So, I finally got my turn? She asked with a giggle. Don't be like that, Shay said as he helped her up. I'm just joking, she said as she grabbed his arm. I enjoyed watching you with the little ones, she said. Either you are giving away free weapon training or teaching them rhetorics, mathematics, science, and literatures, she said. I enjoyed watching you, she said with a smile on her face. She isn't going to lie, watching him spend time with the orphans in the monastery, playing with them, and teaching them is one of her guilty pleasures. It's even easier to imagine him as a father, to fantasize about having a family with him someday, and in turn, hurt herself once more as her heart cried out to him, for him to look her way and see her the way she see him, to give her his heart instead. She can also give him the love he wanted from whoever that woman is. She refused to believe that it was Sophia Durstein, but it didn't make this unease, this sense of despair disappear even if it wasn't Sophia Durstein. All she knows is that she wanted to be the only one, she wanted to possess his heart. All he have to do is give himself to her and she will love him for all her days. She might have the adoration of every person in Fodlan, have the world at her feet, and might have gained riches beyond her wildest dreams, and have prestige and fame, but what is all that if she can't have one person she wanted? Useless, empty. She rather be a nobody than be the Archbishop, adored by many and have gained riches and fame beyond compare, while she watch another bask in the same love, the same affection she so desire for herself from the man she longed to have. She longed to shower with every ounce of her love and affection without the fear of rejection. Is that so? Shay asked as she pressed herself closer to him as he leads her further away from the town and into the small hill overlooking the town. And where are you taking me? She asked as she let him take the lead. You'll see, Shay said with an excited smile as they started the short trek to the top of the hill. Well, this isn't the first time he took her someplace he found in one of his patrols, and it certainly isn't the last, she hoped. They continued their trek until they reached the top, and the view at the top of the hill took her breath away. Now that they have arrived at the top and a good kilometers away from the village, she can clearly see the sky, untainted by the light of the village and only basking in its natural beauty. The dark sky is tinged with a darker shade of blue with billions and billions of diamonds decorating the dark fabric of night's veil, making them glimmer in contrast of its dark hue, and a cluster of stars trail down the dark sky as though it was forming a road to some place only a mind can conjure. A single glint can be seen in a regular interval as a star shot across the sky before it disappeared once more before it appeared again. Beautiful, right? Shay said as he looked at the sight above, a wonder made by the goddess to show them the beauty of the place which she have called home once. She tear her eyes away from the sight of the sky above and back down to the ground where her anchor have held her down firmly but gently as he guide her through all her cares and worry and into serenity, the night sky reflected in his eyes, combining both the dusk and the night in them in a beautiful symphony of both peace and of tranquility. She stared at him, enchanted and mesmerized by him as he unknowingly cast his mysterious spell on her once more, making everything around her disappear as he become the sole being in this world. Yes, she muttered as she admired his profile, calm and at ease as the events of the day ebb away into calm serenity. Beautiful, she muttered with a smile as she felt her heart be put at ease as she basked in his presence, in the presence of the man she called home. Right. Shay said, meeting her eyes with his usual smile plastered on his face that made her heart flutter and warm. I stumble upon this one time I was coming back from my nightly patrol and thought that it was a beautiful sight, and also, Shay said with a pause as he turned his eyes towards the sky again. What? She asked, nudging him gently to continue. I thought of you as always, Shay said as a light blush slowly tainted his cheeks before he tear his eyes away from the sky once more. I already told you, didn't I? He asked as his purple eyes gazed into her own, sincere and adoring, that whenever I saw something beautiful, amazing or anything in between, you are the first face that came into mind, he said as his eyes bore into her with an intensity and softness that made the longing, the hunger, and the desires burn brightly in her heart along with the selfishness that came along with this feeling. I never told you this before, Shay said before he shake his head. Rather, I don't have the courage to, he said, but time is running out and I feel like if I don't say it now then I won't be able to say it ever, Shay said before he took a deep breath. Since the day my mum died and the day I have been kicked out of my village, I found myself unable to attach myself to a person or a place in fear that I might lose them altogether, he said, denying myself the luxury of having a home in fear of destroying it one day just like how I destroyed mine once, and I have trouble loving someone in fear that I will only bring them misfortune and grief just as I did with my mother and the kind healer. That's why I distanced myself from you when we first met and when I got appointed as your knight. I'm afraid that if I ever did get attached to you then, I might hurt you, and hurting you is akin to driving a dagger to my own heart, Shay said. But, he said as he reached out to touch her cheek with the back of his pointer finger, you slowly creep up on me, unexpectedly and quietly, Shay said with a soft smile, kept my heart grounded and made me want to get over my fear of loving something or someone, made me want to better myself in order to give you the best of me and not to burden your heart with worries and grief, he said lovingly. Fodlan is just a piece of dirt in my eyes, a barren and lifeless land that I'm doomed to wander to the day I die. I never thought of it as home once, but since the day you came into my life, Fodlan feels like home, and that's when I realized, Shay said as his smile grows softer and more affectionate, home isn't Fodlan nor was it Gareg Mach. He said, my home is you, Shay said, and where you are that's where I belong because you are my home, he said earnestly and sincerely. She can feel her heart skip a beat. Those words. She longed to hear him echo what she thought of him back to her. But the warmth that spread through her body and her heart disappeared just as fast as it enveloped her in its loving embrace and was replaced by cold fear as she heard the voice of her conscience that told her of her deeds and how she is lying to him even though she claimed to love him with all of her heart and being. I am sorry if I overstepped my boundaries, Shay said as his face fell after hearing only silence from her, but I feel that I should tell you, he said. I don't expect you to share the same sentiment as me but Shay said. I'm so sorry, she said numbly as she realized what she is doing. It's okay, Shay said with a heavy sigh as his smile turned into one of despair. I should expect that he said. No, that's not it. She exclaimed urgently, I share the same sentiment. I thought of you as my home too, she said as she felt her heart beating rapidly as she prepared for the inevitable heartbreak that will follow. Your Grace? Shay asked in confusion. Even though she is saying what he always wanted to hear from her, why does she look like she is at the edge of despair? Is it because she is forcing herself out of guilt and out of obligation to tell him that? And I felt like I don't deserve everything that you have to offer, she muttered. Not after everything I've done to you, she said as she looked at the ground, unable to look him the eyes any longer lest her resolve crumbles again. You've done to me? What are you talking about? Shay asked with a nervous chuckle. You've done nothing wrong, he said as he holds her face gently in between his warm and gentle hands. All you've been to me is kind and gentle, and I couldn't have asked for a better employer and friend, Shay said gently. She looked into his eyes and she can finally feel the overbearing weight of her guilt and despair as she saw the trusting and the earnest look in his eyes. She wrapped her arms around his waist and buried her face on his chest, possibly for the last time before she let go of him and took a step back. I did it, she said as she looked him in the eyes. What are you talking about? Shay said, clearly confused and visibly distressed. I'm the Ashen Demon, she said, and how she hated that moniker now more than ever. I'm the one who wiped out Berling's mercenary, I'm the one who almost killed you that night, I'm the one who you have been swearing to kill all this time, she exclaimed. Shay is frozen as she revealed all to him. Shay, she called out as she reached out her hand to touch him, to beg for his forgiveness, to tell him that he meant the world for her and that she did it because it was her job and it wasn't her intention. Don't touch me, Shay said as he recoiled from her touch. Shay, she pleaded as she felt her chest constrict at his rejection as she reached out for him again, imploring him to forgive her. Don't touch me, Shay said firmly as he stepped back from her, the soft look in his eyes slowly disappearing and was replaced by both anger and hate towards her. Stay away from me, he said as turn his back from her and run from her. Her arms hung limply at her side as she looked at her feet. She already know this will happen, she knows, and she forced herself to prepare for it. But it still hurts. Shall we begin our dance? Silas asked to no one as he activated the contraption and released the spell stored in them. Chaos broke loose as the spell activated. Check the description for the links to the author.